This episode brought to you by the afternoon. Did you run out of time in the morning? Well, why not try the afternoon? Is the evening already booked up? Why not try the afternoon? The afternoon. There for all your needs. Get an afternoon. Free on me. You're using the promo code Hannah the Human. Let's hit that theme song. Oh, nice. We're going for existential vibes. Hannah the Human. I can get down with it. Get down with it. Get down with it. This is fun. I'm recording a podcast and I already know what I want to name it. It's called Thoughts on Divorce. And by the fact that it's named that means I stuck with the name. But I know I'm going to stick with the name because I have some thoughts on divorce. I just want to talk about my thoughts about this because I have changed my thoughts on this topic over the years because of personal experience. Not that I have been divorced, but there's been a couple divorces in my family, and I experienced them differently, and they have changed my opinion on what I used to think about divorce. And I do want to clarify, as you all know, I am not a therapist, a psychologist, somebody who is, studied about divorce or whatever. No credentials. That's why these are just thoughts. And here goes. So when I was a kid, my parents were always like, oh, we'll never get a divorce. And, both of their parents, all of my grandparents are still married today, and they have a high value for marriage and a high value on not divorcing. And I'm really grateful for how I was raised and the values that were given to me around marriage, because commitment was seen not as an enslavement, but as the vehicle through which love could be experienced. So a lot of people really don't like the concept of marriage because they think it traps you or, it's a hopeless idea and fantasy. And I was raised with a strong value for marriage, and seeing my grandparents still together today and everything does confirm that it can work, and it's been beautiful, a beautiful concept for me. And that's why I would like to get married someday. And I would like to be refined by being committed to somebody, because that's also been my experience just in friendships and in community. You don't grow as a person when you avoid things that are difficult. You don't grow in a relationship when you say, we disagree, we're incompatible, I'm out. However, I think there is a place for divorce. Because if you're going to view marriage as sacred and beautiful, then you have to, if you're married, actually be upholding that. Marriage works because two people agree, vow, commit, and that commitment falls apart and those agreements fall apart when one or both of the parties aren't sticking to them. So it's this ironic thing of, though you commit for your sake, right? You can't make the other person commit. All you're in charge of is giving 100%. However, when is it unloving to give 100% to something that is dead? So those are the thoughts that I have, because I super value the ideal of marriage, and I want to live up to that. I want to be married someday, and I want my marriage to be a beautiful thing that inspires other people to be married and to love others and to commit and to build a life with somebody. And so as a kid, I thought that the only way that you can really show that is you stay committed, right? So my parents should never, ever, never, never, ever, ever, ever get a divorce. And that is where I found my security. The thing, though, is looking back at what my parents' relationship was like or how I experienced it was actually there was a lot of insecurity and a lot of saying it's one thing, but it's really something else. Like saying, we're married, we're committed, we love each other. But my experience of my parents is they don't enjoy each other. My experience of my parents is they don't get along. Yeah, maybe they're not arguing all the time, but the fact that they're not arguing deep down feels wrong to me. It feels unsafe. And so I have a viewpoint now that sticking it out and staying in a marriage when you're not actually exemplifying what marriage is can be just as harmful as ending the marriage, as failing to fulfill your vows. Because now my parents they've been separated for a few years and they're legally divorced now. And I always thought that that would be the most terrible thing. Oh, that would shatter my world. Because when I was really little, my aunt and uncle got divorced and they lived in a different state than me. So it wasn't this thing that I was super connected to, but it still, as a kid, made me ask questions. And I remember thinking, wow, it's so tough for my cousin. You know, now she has 2 houses she has to go back and forth to, and that's so unstable and unsettling. And I just remember thinking, divorce is so terrible, you know. And then now my uncle is married to another lady, and my aunt is fulfilling the things she wants to do. She wrote a book, and she got a degree and all this wonderful stuff. And I'm good friends with my cousin. Shout out Emily Doda. Hoorah. And so, you know, it might have been more harmful to everybody involved if my aunt and uncle had stuck through a marriage that was not worth it. The ironic thing is even saying a marriage not worth it. A marriage is simply 2 people, right? It's not this separate entity. It's not like, oh, this is a bad marriage. Oh dear, I'm stuck. It's because of the effort or non-effort of the 2 parties involved that it is what it is. So, you know, a marriage is or isn't something because of the people. So you can't, it just sounds less offensive instead of saying something negative about 2 people. It's easier to just say, oh, the marriage wasn't right. The marriage sucked. But what you're really saying is the way those 2 people were interacting with each other sucked. It's a lot less offensive sounding to say, yeah, that marriage was just so tough, rather than, yeah, those 2 people were just so tough on each other and really were bad at doing relationship. Okay, well, thanks for putting it how it is, Hannah. So anyway, I digress, or do I? I don't really. What I'm trying to say in all this is, as a kid, I experienced, wow, I saw all the negative things. Just the anger and the stuff that my aunt and uncle had for each other after they divorced. But I also saw a lot of positive things come out of the death of that one marriage. Now my uncle is married to, like I said, somebody else and has a couple more children, and he seems a lot happier. And I don't interact really with my aunt, but I, hear about her through my cousin. And I'm friends with my cousin. She seems turned out fine. She's a great, awesome person. So, divorce wasn't the worst thing ever. She's a really great, cool person. And yeah, I guess there are harms that divorce causes, but I also hear a little bit about how her parents interacted. And I'm like, no, I think there's actually less harm by the 2 of them separating than if they had stuck together to honor the commitment. And I remember this one moment. I'm going to fast forward. So that was when I was like a little kid, like 7 or something. I don't know. Who knows? Somewhere around 8 probably. And then fast forward to I'm 13. I remember this moment. I was sitting on a futon mattress in what we called our playroom. It had toys and stuff in it. And we lived in Minnesota at this time. And I remember my mom looking me in my eyes as I'm like all nervous about this thing because they told me that my mom had an eating disorder and so she's going to go away to treatment and Was I 14 then? Maybe I was 14. Anyway, I was some age. And I remember saying, you and Daddy aren't going to get a divorce, are you? She said, no, Hannah, we never will. I remember a moment when my dad told me that, hey, we're not getting a divorce, and how that gave me a lot of comfort and strength as a kid. And I'm telling you right now, no, we're not going to get a divorce. That's something me and your dad don't even think about doing. And I remember feeling so much security in that moment as a 14 or whatever year old. And now fast forward to I'm 24, almost 25, so that's like a decade later. I'm so glad my parents got divorced. I'm not glad that things got to the point where divorce was the best option for them. I want to be clear on that. I don't think it was all wonderful and everything that this became their path. And I think this doesn't need to be the path of people who get married. They don't need to grow apart. I don't think that, some people do get in really bad marriages where there's a lot of red flags and everybody close to them is like, I don't think you should get married. But most people, they get married to another decent human being and things usually go decently well, unless they go decently horrible, and then you get a divorce. My earlier statement about a marriage is only as good as the two people interacting in it. I want this to not at all be heard harshly. Okay, I have great love for both of my parents. They are awesome, amazing people, and they did relationship as best as they knew how. There were a lot of difficult stuff they had to go through, and a lot of curveballs. And, as every human being on this earth, we're all growing, we're all transforming, and hopefully growing in a positive direction. We're changing all the time, and it does take a lot of work and 110% effort to be fully in a relationship with someone as you're changing. I mean, my parents were married for over 25 years. That's a lot of time. I mean, I'm not even the same person I was 5 years ago, let alone 25. So it takes a lot of intentionality to not just stay married, but to really be in a marriage. My parents clearly, again, I'm not trying to judge, and anyway, I'll just say it. My parents clearly didn't put in the intentionality and the work or whatever it takes to grow a marriage into something more beautiful 25 years later than something that's worse than 25 years ago. I don't know that anybody could have done better or worse, or I'm not saying, oh, they failed or they're bad or, I'm going to do better. I don't know. All I can know is that I see how I want to be very intentional about creating the type of marriage I want someday. And that doesn't just happen up to the point I get married. That happens every day. Because I've seen by my parents getting divorced that you can't just say those vows and sign a paper and fast forward 30 years and you're still together. I used to kind of have a naive way of thinking about it. And now I still have the ideal. I still believe that love can be beautiful and wonderful and that marriage is awesome. And I want to be married someday. And I also know that in order to get the wonderful, awesome sides of marriage, it's also going to feel like a fire in a crucible. That in order to get the gold that I want out of a lifelong love and partner, I'm also going to feel like that partner and that love and that relationship is a fire burning me into nothing. Because, in order to get the gold, you have to go through the fire. In order to have the joy, you got to go through the pain, like I was saying in the last episode. So, yeah, I still hold on to the ideal, and I'm much more aware of the humanity of it all and how it takes intentionality and how sometimes things just don't work out. And I think it's more harmful to hold on to something dead, something that hasn't worked out, and to lie about it to yourself and others and say, no, it's still alive. Oh, no, we're doing great. Oh, no, this is still working, than to let it go. That's how disease spreads in your body, Imagine if you got a cut on your foot and your foot started rotting, right? And it goes terrible. Sometimes people have to cut off. They have to amputate a limb in order to get rid of an infection. That's way better than letting the infection spread and destroy your whole body. Sometimes in order to have a good life, you have to acknowledge that a relationship has died, or really just acknowledge the form of that relationship has died. This entity that you called a family, a marriage, has changed. And there's plenty of stories of people who acknowledge that something's dead and then they work to build it up. In my parents' case, just due to circumstances and what each of them was individually dealing with, both parties were not able and are currently not able to rebuild something new between each other. And I know that there's some opinions in my family and friends probably that my parents should work it out, that, it was a commitment, that, okay, we can acknowledge that the relationship died, but let's rebuild. Anything can happen, right? And I'm just saying, personally, for me, the whole thing of letting something die is you don't know the outcome. You don't know the result. So you're not really letting it die when you're saying, all right, I let it die, and now you guys need to work on your marriage and so that my parents are together again. For me, I've had to let it die. And I've been glad about that because I haven't wanted, I don't want to hold on to a marriage. I don't want how the last 10 years of my parents' relationship was. I don't want that to be the next 10 years. I don't want that to be the type of home that I come home to when I have kids someday for Thanksgiving or whatever. I don't want that. I want something different. And if my parents find that something different with other people and build a home with somebody else, what I really want is I want a space of love. I want peace. When I envision, having kids someday and they get to go over to grandma and grandpa's. Yeah, I did always envision before that both my mom and dad would be in the same house and they would go over to grandma and grandpa's and there we go. But when I pause and think about it, I'm like, oh, I'm actually more attached to the safety and the love that I imagine in that, and less attached to my parents have to be together. It has to look like this. They have to live in this kind of house at this kind of place. It has to be this certain way. Now I'm like, great. If there's 2 houses that they go to for grandma and grandpa, I don't care. If one's in one state and one's in another state, the thing that I want is when I have kids someday, I want them to have grandparents that are loving and safe and kind. And there's people I know who have great love and kindness and respect for people who they're no longer married to, and they still interact healthfully, and their kids still interact healthfully, and all this great stuff. And so I've got to see that my childish way of viewing things, like, oh, we need to hold on to this form in order to have the substance. We need to hold on to marriage in order to have love. I see now that it is important to choose the form. It is important to place myself in the form of marriage because that's the game you get to play. Like you don't get better, for example, like I've been watching a lot of soccer. You don't get better at soccer if you don't go practice and submit yourselves to the rules of the game, right? If you go on a soccer field and say, I'm going to use my hands and do whatever I want to do, you're not going to get better at soccer, and you're not going to be better as a person, and everybody's going to not like you. So it is good to submit yourself to rules and to structures and to forms. So the form of marriage is very beautiful. But what we all really want is the substance of love. We all really want the substance of transformation, of community, whatever it is, kindness, hope, all these great stuff. That's what we really want. And so we go and try to find it in contexts and forms like churches, relationships, jobs, houses, different towns, different communities. And those are the vehicles through which we do find love and all the other good stuff that we really want. Those are the fires that do refine us into the treasure that we want to be. And let's not lose sight. It's the refining and the treasure we want. Let's not worship the blacksmith shop when it's the gold that we really want. And to go back to marriage specifically, if marriage is supposed to be this beautiful thing that does refine 2 people into more loving human beings, at the end of the day, it's an affront to that beautiful image and picture if you aren't honest about your relationship and your marriage with yourself, with your family, and with the world. And so that's why my current experience and thoughts on divorce are when people said, "Oh, I'm so sorry your parents got divorced." I say, "Oh, well, thank you for that, but I'm actually kind of relieved." You know, I'm fine. I'm glad that my parents are just finally honest about where things are. Because unless a seed falls into the ground and dies, it will not produce any fruit. So even though the ending, the acknowledgement of the death, the funeral that is divorce happens, I don't view that as a terrible ending. I view that as the ground from which something new may grow. And I just want to say something really quick about control. Again, I'm not super wise and I haven't been married personally myself, so ask me in 20 years after I've been married. But I just see in my parents' relationship and others that you can't control the other party involved. All you can do is stick to your vow and your commitment. So say you vowed to communicate and to love and to honor. All you can do is do that to the other person. And no one else can tell you when the point is that it's no longer fruitful to do that. Meaning like, well, let's just take it to extreme, right? Oh, I marry somebody and I vow to, honor and love them and submit to their views and, love, all that great stuff. Till death do us part. Kissy, kissy. And then say, they get into an addiction and start hitting me and abusing me. It would be unkind and unloving to myself to not communicate to that person I'm married to, hey, this is unacceptable. What you're doing to me is not honoring me. You aren't upholding your side of it. In order for me to be able to safely uphold my side of this commitment, I'm going to need things to change. And then if that person doesn't try to honor me and respect me and uphold their side of the commitment, sometimes it can be great wisdom and love that has somebody commit to continuing to love a person. Maybe they need to create some distance or whatever, but maybe you don't divorce them. However, for me, I've also seen a great path forward is you say, wow, we're no longer able to uphold this commitment, and so let's get divorced. Because if the goal is really love, then a marriage isn't loving when you're unkind to yourself by staying in it. Or not even by staying in it like, oh, the only options are to leave or not, but like not acknowledging that it's uncomfortable for you. And like I see with my parents, man, if they could have acknowledged that 10 years ago, there might be a different outcome with their marriage right now. But they acknowledged it and saw the truth when they did. And the result of that was they agreed to get divorced. And the awesome thing is I don't feel any resentment or hatred or anger between my parents. I mean, there's a little rub and there's not a great communication between my mom and dad right now, but I think has to do with just a lot more with the demons my mom is fighting at the moment of addiction and different stuff. There's genuinely between both of them no ill feelings, no big hatred or anger. Like the result of this whole process is love. And I mean, if my mom can conquer the things that she's fighting enough to, be able to live who she authentically is, I can see 10, 15, 20 years down the road, all of us being happily in the same room together. I can see an atmosphere of love for my future family. So those are some of my thoughts on divorce. I can't wait to see what my thoughts are 20 years from now after I've been married. It's going to be good. And I do kind of feel like this is unfair because I'm giving all my thoughts to whoever is listening to this and I'm not hearing your thoughts back. So it kind of feels like a dominating conversation in a way. But I guess that's what a podcast is. I talk. So if you all know me and want to share your thoughts with me, please do. I'd love to hear other people's thoughts on divorce since you so kindly listened to mine. Recording this and thinking back to my thoughts on divorce and stuff made me also remember a song that I wrote back when I was a teenager. And reading back the lyrics and everything, I think it's such a good emotional picture of what was going on for me that I sensed underneath the surface of everything. And so here is me playing that song on guitar. These cares I hold upon my shoulders, they will fall off once I let go. So take my hands into your own, that I may let my burdens go. What do I do when my first love's gone? How can I find the passion deeper? So take my hands into your own, that I may let my burdens go, that I may let my burdens go. If we could watch from the sidelines, would we realize how our eyes are blind? Would we see that the pain lies? Would we see how our hurt is disguised? Would we see the love still there? Could we enjoy it while we're both still here? These cares I hold upon my shoulders, I'm ready now to let go. As you let go, may you realize all the love that you have in your open hands. Zen moment. Yes. But seriously though, thanks for listening, guys. Fun stuff coming next episode. Serious stuff this episode. And above all, seriously though. Seriously, guys, peace out.